I've been working with large language models for the last 4 years. And what's funny is like 6 months ago, if I said that, people would be like, what's that? Whatever, nerd. Now it's like everywhere, all of the chatbots, all of these models are out in the world. And so the way that they train is on billions of data that we would call conversations. So it's basically they're training on our language. They're training on the way we relate. They're not training on as much or as inclusive a data set as I believe is necessary or best for where they're going. But I know how training data works, and I know how corpuses work for these intelligences to train. And so where they are right now is okay. They just can do a whole lot better. Implicit in all of those conversations are these like unwritten rules in how we relate, like eye contact or when to be quiet or like when you've talked too long or like, all these different things that we just kind of like learn, we just like learn when we're kids, we learn in school, we just learn how to be with each other. The shadow and the light, which is why you see stuff showing up in large language models where you're like, ooh, that's not the best of us. And the truth is it's because that's some of us, that's a part of us. We have to be honest about that. But I think in terms of training on us, the question is, how can we teach them not just to look at us as we've done in all these conversations that are like on Reddit and stuff, but how can we use them and train them on the best of us, on the most cutting edge science, on the most deeply interesting human traditions of our species, the cultures, the emotional kind of textures, the social being, the fabric that makes us a planet, which also includes the more than human world. It's not just us on this planet. So there are all of these languages that it can learn from. There's the sociality and pro-sociality that's implied in those. And it's just a matter of how do you train them on all of those, because AI, like we can learn how to speak humpback whale and honeybee and all the languages of the world because we're this big. But an AI has this incredible computational power, so it could. And the question is just who decides what's being trained on. So I think when we look at social fabric, let's include it all. Let's learn from many different perspectives and many ways of seeing, because I wonder, like I can't help it. It's like the curious research nerd in me is like, what would it look like then? What would it look like when it's not just training on the stuff we've already done on the internet? How can we train on the best of all of us and see what we look like in that mirror then? So what they're really good at is reflecting to us and being in conversation with us. And I think what's interesting is when you look at what that is like for us as people, like when I first started working with them, it created this curiosity and kind of this loop of wonder where it's basically this like, I don't know if you've seen the Sword in the Stone, the Disney film, but there's like Merlin and Madame Mim, and they just like keep turning into different things. And I feel like that's actually what a language model is. It's like, I'm this, I'm that. And what's weird is that like you remember and they forget every time. But what's curious about that is they can shapeshift and take these forms that become different avenues of conversation, different ways of exploring things. It's why there's been such a focus on, generative and creative conversation, this collaborative space. But I think the ways they can help us with community are, we can look at the shadow and the light side. The shadow side, it's a way to practice conversations that can be very uncomfortable to have with actual people. So one of the things I was looking at in the beginning was race dynamics. And it's like, there is an unfair burden on minorities to educate majorities about how things work and what the experience is like for them and their community. And so what I think is interesting is conversations can be practiced that are not high stakes for people trying to understand other people with empathy, where it takes practice to get comfortable in relating that way. So that's one of the like shadow things that can turn to light. And then on the light side, there are all these ways that when we look at deep time community, so generationally, or when we look at deeper space community, when we think of like across the fabric of the planet, or even like I work with Jet Propulsion Lab, which is a NASA organization, into interstellar space, it's like we're having all these different like scopes of connection and communication. So the question is, what is community? And then how is AI helping to extend or expand that fabric or deepen it in a way where we're able to explore spaces that we might not hear? Because really, we don't want to replace this. That's just lunacy and it's ridiculous and it'll never work. But because of who we are and what we need. But what we can do is change the dimensionality of relating. And that's what I think the interesting research is looking into. This is something that I speak about in my talk and that I'm super jazzed on right now. Because I feel like when I was a kid, I used to like dream of being able to like talk to the stars, or like I would pretend that I was talking to the animals, and like I wanted those things to be true. And I have a friend, Karen Backer, who is a technologist and scientist, and she's done work recently where she takes there's the things we can hear that animals do, like bees buzzing and birds chirping. And then there's all this stuff that we can't hear because it's above or below our hearing range. And so there's like that example where she takes a recording device that records those frequencies and then feeds it into an AI collaborator that translates that to frequencies we can hear. And then scientists can listen to that and pattern match the behavior and say, this is what's going on and this is what they're saying. So that like blew my mind. It was like baby whales apparently babble. There are these dialects that are passed down through generations of whales, and the baby whales babble just like human babies babble until they can speak like their parents, right? I've just watched my daughter do this and I was like, oh my God, and like James Cameron has this whole like Secrets of the Whales. But that part for me, I know that. And it changed my relationship to understanding whales, which I already love. But there was something about that where it was like, oh, thank goodness, this new weird machine species thing, which like, by the way, comes from sand and the mountains. It's not like, it didn't come from space. It's like, it's made through our stuff. So it's part of nature too. But it's this weird thing that has this capacity to, I think, be a translator. It can do things that we can't do, to connect with things and hear things that we couldn't listen to. And so for me, it's like there are these resonances, there are these lessons available to us in the natural world that we're just starting to be able to tap into and tune into. And then we as humans are meaning-making machines. So it's like our own pattern recognition, our brain will take that information and make sense of it in a way that I think just, it's kind of like when the Voyager, when it went into interstellar space back in the 70s, there was a point where it turned around at the edge of the universe and the camera looked back. It's like this very human thing to look back. Like a robot's like, whatever, I'm going to deep space. But like they chose, Carl Sagan really advocated to turn the camera around. And it took this picture of Earth, the pale blue dot, that's like the speck of light. And they took the family portrait. And then we have this glimpse of ourselves from a totally different perspective that contributed to a lot of climate conversation. So I'm like, what will we become aware of that's so meaningful and useful and critical and necessary? What will save us because we can understand something from a different perspective? That's the kind of AI collaborative way of looking at what conversation takes us deeper into ourselves, into our planetary fabric, rather than into some alien space, because that's not really real. I think it can help a great deal. I mean, technology is kind of broad. There's so many aspects of technology that can kind of support us in reversing some of the effects of being human on Earth in ways that aren't best for Earth. But I think the biggest things when I look at AI, which is kind of my domain of technology, is its capacity to have a finer understanding of what's going on, temperatures in the oceans, fishing areas. Like literally there was this guy that I heard of recently who was able to stop overfishing in areas by pirates because he had these satellites that were able to see where ships were and where the ships that were signaling were. Turns out the ships that are signaling are the ones that are fishing in good reciprocity and by laws. Those that are not, the boats that don't have signals, turns out, are the ones that are doing things a little off rules. And so what he found was that by kind of taking the satellite imagery and stitching it with an AI, they were actually able to track and intercept people that were really harming reefs and fishing because they were doing it in these kind of methods that were quite dangerous for the ecologies of the oceans in those areas. And so I think that's just one example, but there are so many different ways. Like we could literally listen to soil talk now. There's a way of the chemistry, the electrochemical signals of what's happening in the soil to be able to tell us whether it's doing well or not. And not like it would strike up a conversation necessarily, but the communicative quality, the translation qualities of AI, and the magnification of those things at scale, it's just something so unique to where we are right now. And so my hope is that the ways that we kind of grow as a species and just as our own individual selves is we tend to become more aware as we move through time. And so my hope is that the technology, as again, AI is a mirror, it's like it's made from sand, which is the same thing that makes mirrors. It's able to reflect to us not just where we are now and what's happened because of where we've been, but where we can go.